Have you ever had someone steal from you and you just couldn't take it anymore? That's what happened to me. Every day, I'd leave a few pens on my desk and they'd disappear. And when I realized who was taking them, I decided to turn the tables in a way he would never expect. If you've ever had someone cross the line and you finally got the sweet, sweet revenge you deserve, hit that like button, subscribe, and get ready for one of the most satisfying paybacks you'll ever hear. I sit at my desk in the middle of a bustling office, the sound of keyboards clicking, phones ringing, and the occasional murmur of conversations filling the air. It's not a bad place to work. Decent colleagues, decent pay. But there's one problem that's been driving me absolutely insane. My pens keep disappearing. At first, I thought maybe I was just being careless. I'd leave one or two on my desk, and somehow they'd vanish by the end of the day. I figured I must have just forgotten where I put them, or maybe I used them up without realizing it. But then it happened again, and again, and then I started noticing something that sent a chill down my spine. I began to realize that every time my pens went missing, there was one coworker who always had the exact same kind of pen in his hand, Brad. Now, Brad wasn't the most obvious thief. He didn't sneak around or try to hide it. He was a regular guy who always had something to say in meetings and loved to joke around. But the pens? He always had one of mine. It was impossible to ignore. At first, I tried to let it slide. After all, maybe it was just a coincidence, right? Maybe Brad just liked the same pens I did. But the more I noticed, the more it started to gnaw at me. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was taking them on purpose. Every time he reached for my pens, I would just sit there, fuming silently, trying to avoid confrontation. But deep down, I felt that nagging sense of betrayal. My pens weren't just pens. They were mine. They were the little things I held on to in my otherwise ordinary office life. One day, after a particularly frustrating meeting, I walked back to my desk, and there they were, 3 of my pens, sitting neatly on Brad's desk. No apology, no explanation, nothing. It was the last straw. I had been polite. I had let it slide, but now my patience was worn thin. I couldn't confront him directly. After all, we were colleagues, and I didn't want to make things awkward. But the feeling of being disrespected, of having something so small and personal taken from me day after day, was eating away at me. I knew I had to do something about it. But what? That's when the idea hit me. What if I could get my revenge, but in a way he would never expect? What if I could take my pen back, without confrontation, without words, just a little experiment to teach him a lesson? I headed to the store the next day, my heart racing with anticipation. After browsing the aisles for a while, I finally found them, disappearing ink pens. Pens that would write normally at first, but the ink would fade away after a short period. It was the perfect solution. Brad would take the pen, use it, and be completely baffled when his notes started disappearing. He wouldn't know what hit him. I bought the pack, grinning to myself. This was going to be good. The next day, I placed the new pens on my desk, right in the spot where my old ones always went missing. I tried to remain casual, pretending like everything was just as normal as always. As if fate had a sense of humor, Brad came over shortly after, plucking one of the pens from my desk and giving it a casual glance. I could barely hide my excitement. I had to keep my face neutral, but inside, I was giddy. I watched him use the pen throughout the morning, writing down notes in the meeting. And then, halfway through, it started to happen. I saw his brow furrow as he looked down at the page in confusion. The ink was starting to fade. His notes were disappearing before his eyes. His face turned pale, his eyes darting back and forth across the page as if trying to make sense of the impossible. The more he wrote, the more his notes vanished, leaving nothing behind but a blank page. I could barely contain my laughter. Every muscle in my body wanted to burst out into a grin, but I forced myself to stay calm, keeping my eyes on my own work, pretending I had no idea what was going on. Brad's hand froze, and for a split second, the whole room went silent as he desperately shook the pen, trying to get it to work again. But nothing. It was just a faded mess of lines. I watched as his face turned from confusion to frustration to sheer panic. By now, everyone was looking at him, and I could feel the tension building. Finally, Brad stood up, holding the pen like it was some kind of cursed object, and asked, "Does anyone know what's going on with this pen?" It's like the ink just disappeared. My heart was pounding in my chest, but I couldn't help it. Inside, I was bursting with joy, the look of confusion on his face, the humiliation as everyone around him realized something was off. It was priceless. Brad quickly excused himself from the meeting, clearly embarrassed, and I couldn't help but watch as he hurried back to his desk, trying to figure out what happened, but the damage was done. From that moment on, Brad never touched my pens again. He'd glance at them, but he never took one. My pens were safe, and my victory was sweet. Looking back, I realized that sometimes the little things, like pens, can be surprisingly symbolic. It wasn't just about the pens. It was about respect. It was about standing up for myself without needing to make a big scene or escalate things. In a way, this tiny act of revenge reminded me that justice doesn't always need to be loud. Sometimes it's just quiet and subtle. If this story gave you chills, smash that like button and tell us in the comments, what's the most satisfying revenge you've ever witnessed? And of course, don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.